Hello and welcome to Lesson 6 of the Basic Music Theory course. In this lesson I want to go over simple time signatures and how to group notes. So, the very first question we should be asking ourselves is, what are time signatures? What do we need them for? What do they do in music? Well, time signatures are just a way of organizing music into regular units that we call beats. Okay, so that's all that a time signature is. It's just a systematic way of organizing your music, all your rhythms, all your crotchets, quavers, semiquavers, your dotted notes, your ties, your rests. It's just a way of organizing all of that into regular units that we call beats. Okay, and I'll show you what a time signature looks like. You probably come across something like this before. Um, I'll just draw for you. Make that a wee bit thicker, I think. I'll just draw for you what a time signature looks like. So you usually start off with a clef at the beginning of your staff, okay? That's the very first thing you would draw, and I'm just putting in a treble clef for the sake of convenience. And then that's followed by your key signature, and I'm just using the key signature of G major or its relative minor, E minor, again, just for convenience. And then you come across your time signature. Okay, so a time signature looks something like this. Okay, it's just a set of two numbers, one on top of the other. So that's what your time signature looks like. Now that we know what a time signature's function is, and now that we know what it looks like, what do these numbers actually tell us? What is the point of these numbers and why are they organized this way? Well, the top number of any time signature will always tell you how many beats are in a bar. Okay, so the time signature as a whole will organize the music into regular units that we call beats, but the top number will tell you how many of those beats are in a bar. Okay, and a bar basically looks something like this. Okay, it's just a bar line. It's just a line that goes through the staff. Okay, so this is your bar, and this would be your next bar. Again, you would have another line. So there's two bars that I've drawn on that staff, and the top number will tell you how many beats are in a bar. Okay, so that's what the top number tells you, how many. And again, sorry, my writing is so bad, it's very difficult to write on the iPad. Okay, so that's what the top number tells you. The bottom number will tell you what type of beats they are. Okay, so that's what the bottom number tells you, what type of beats. So the top number tells you how many, and the bottom number tells you what type. So we're going to look at this one first, this time signature 2-4. Okay, that's the first one we've just drawn there, and I'll explain what that means now. So we know that 2-4 means there are two beats in a bar, because the top number 2 tells us how many beats are in the bar. So we know that there are two beats that are going to occur in here, and another two beats that will occur in that space, okay, within one bar and the second bar. But we haven't been told yet what type of beats they are. That's what this bottom number 4 means. This is where a lot of confusion exists with time signatures. People try to remember what does the bottom number mean. Anytime you see a 4 at the bottom of a time signature like that, that 4 will always signify crotchets. So that entire time signature means that there are two crotchet beats per bar. So two crotchet beats per bar. If you're familiar with the American system of classifying notes, you will know that they don't call this note a crotchet, they call it a quarter note. So they don't have crotchets and quavers, they have quarter notes and eighth notes and 16th notes and half notes and whole notes. Okay, so their whole note would be a semibreve, their half note's a minim, their quarter note is a crotchet, their eighth note is a quaver, and so on and so on and so on. But it actually helps, I suppose, when you're trying to learn time signatures, just to think of it in terms of the American system of classifying notes, because a crotchet means a quarter note in America. You can see the relationship between that and a time signature 4. Okay, so if anyone who's used to the American system of classifying notes will find that time signatures actually do make a lot of sense. The reason why we have a 4 at the bottom is because we're dealing with quarter notes, and in Europe we call quarter notes crotchets. Okay, but I suppose the general point is exactly the same. 2/4 just means 2 crotchet beats per bar. So now that you know that 2/4 means 2 crotchet beats in a bar, I've just expanded on that to show you the other two most popular simple time signatures. And they are 3/4 for 3 crotchet beats in a bar, and 4/4 for 4 crotchet beats in a bar. Now, obviously, you're going to have more than just crotchets in music that's in 2/4, 3/4, 4/4. You will have things like quavers and semiquavers and so on. So there are certain rules we need to follow when we want to group notes together in simple time signatures like 2/4, 3/4, and 4/4. The main rule is that you should always group notes and rests together according to the beats that you're using. Okay, that obviously depends on your time signature. So because we're in 2/4, 3/4, and 4/4, our beats are crotchet beats, as you can see. So you should group your quavers, your semiquavers, your rests, and so on and so on and so on as often as you can. You should try and group them according to their beats. So because you're grouping notes together according to their beats, this means that anytime you have two quavers next to each other, which could be replaced by a crotchet, you beam them together. So for example, in 2/4, you could have a rhythm that has two quavers next to each other, so you beam them together. Sorry, it looks a wee bit messy. And your next beat could be a crotchet, for example. You could have it the other way around, obviously. Your crotchet coming first and then your two quavers beamed together. You could have other examples, say in 3/4, you could have a crotchet and then two quavers next to each other which are beamed, and then another crotchet. Okay, so 3 crotchet beats in a bar. So that's what I mean by grouping notes together according to the beats that you're using. It also works for semiquavers. So just rub this out. Say you wanted, instead of 2 quavers next to each other, say you had 4 semiquavers next to each other. Well, they all become part of one group. So there's your first crotchet beat, all the notes beam together, and there's your second crotchet beat. Or what you could have is another group of 4 semiquavers beamed together. Okay. So again, anytime you have 2 quavers which could be replaced by a crotchet, you beam them together. Anytime you have 4 semiquavers which could be replaced by a crotchet, you beam them together. It also works for a couple of other examples, like say you have 2 semiquavers and a quaver. Okay, that could be replaced by a crotchet, you beam them together. You could even have dotted notes, for example. For the second beat, you could have a dotted quaver followed by a semiquaver. Okay, and just put in a cross beat there. Very rarely you could even have this type of rhythm where you have a semiquaver and another semiquaver with a quaver in the middle. Okay, so just to expand that rule again, anytime you have 2 quavers which could be replaced by a crotchet, you beam them together. Anytime you have 4 quavers, 4 semiquavers which could be replaced by a crotchet, you beam them together. And also any other group of quavers and semiquavers that can be replaced by a crotchet, you beam them together, as you can see. Okay, so that's what I mean by try to group notes together according to their beats. It's also conventional to group 4 quavers which could be replaced by a minim. You group them together. So say for example you have 4 quavers in a bar. You can actually group all 4 of them together. That gets you your full 2/4 bar. Okay. Sorry, my notes look terrible because it's almost impossible to draw accurately on the iPad. So yeah, anytime you have four quavers, which could be replaced by a minim, you beam them together. So there's an example in 2/4. Again, you could have the exact same example in 3/4, but obviously you need another crotchet beat to equal that up. Or even in 4/4, I better rub this out just to give myself more room. Say, for example, in 4/4, this is going to be the equivalent of two fours. So there's your first beat, first two beats, sorry, and there's your second two beats. Okay, so anytime you have a group of four quavers next to each other, which could be replaced by a minim, for example, these groups here, you beam them together. Okay. There's also a special one for 3/4. I know there's quite a lot of rules you have to remember when you're doing time signatures. But say, for example, in 3/4 you have 6 quavers. In other words, the entire bar in 3/4. Oops, I'll just undo that. The entire bar in 3/4 is just made up of quavers. You can actually beam all of them together. Okay. So 6 quavers filling up a complete bar of 3/4. You beam them together as well. There is one important exception to when you beam 4 quavers together, which could be replaced by a minim, and that occurs in 4/4. Okay, so this is an important one to remember. When you're using 4/4, you never beam quavers or semiquavers or anything. You never beam across the middle of a bar between the second and third beats. Okay, so you would never do this, for example, have 4 quavers in the middle of a bar like that. Okay, so that is dead wrong. Okay, what you would have to do there, believe it or not, is actually split. I better just rub the whole thing out. You'd actually have to split that group up. Okay, so you would have 2 quavers as one group, followed by 2 quavers in the next group. Okay, so you never beam across. Imagine an imaginary line going down the middle of a 4/4 bar. You never ever beam across it. Okay, like that. You never do that. It always has to be split up. Those beats have to be split up. So suppose the main point I'm trying to get across is that you should try to be as clear as possible about where one beat begins and ends and the next beat begins and ends. Okay, so you're trying to make life as easy as possible for the performer, for the musician reading the music. Okay, with that in mind, there are certain things that you should do just to make it a little bit easier for someone to read your music. Say, for example, you're using ties in your music. The general idea is to avoid ties if they're unnecessary. Okay, so avoid ties where possible, but there may be occasions where a tie has to be used. Okay, so for example, to say you're in 4/4 again, or sorry, 2/4 again, and you want this note to actually be a dotted note. In other words, to last as long as a quaver plus a semiquaver. Okay, you would never put in the dot and then the rest of your rhythm. What you should do is tie. Okay, so something that would look like that tied over to your semiquaver. Okay, and that semiquaver could actually be part of another group of semiquavers. Okay, so that is correct. You would never do this. Okay, followed by your 3 semiquavers. Okay, so that rhythm is completely wrong. It just makes it too difficult for the musician to know where does the first beat begin and end. Okay, because what you're really saying is that your first beat begins here and your second beat begins on the dot. Okay, so it just makes it, and then you've got a group of 3 over here out on their own, so it makes it a wee bit difficult for the musician to read. So yeah, that's wrong. Okay, so instead of doing that, you sometimes would have to use a tie. And as you can see, if you use a tie, it's very easy for someone to see where the first beat begins and ends and where the second beat begins and ends. Okay, so sometimes you will have to use ties. Yeah, and also it is possible. It's acceptable, I suppose, to when you're not using four quavers together, which could be replaced by a minim. Say you're using, oops, let's undo that. Say you wanted a dotted rhythm there, followed by two quavers. For me, that's more acceptable than this, putting them all of them together and having their dotted rhythm at the start. That is still possible. That's still technically correct, as is that. But I think the first one is better because it's far easier to see where the first and second beat begin and end. So again, I'm trying to get back to the original point that I made at the start. Try to group your quavers, your semiquavers, and all the other ones that have tails and ticks like that. All those notes that have tails and ticks. Try to group them according to their beats because it just makes life easier to read the music. I'll give you another example. Say you have this rhythm. Sorry, I keep using the red. Yeah, say you have a rhythm, a dotted rhythm again, and two semiquavers in this one. Okay, that to me is far more preferable than beaming everything together like this, because it just makes life very difficult for a musician to know exactly where one beat begins and ends. It's going to sound exactly the same if the musician manages to play it correctly. But I think the first example, you can see very clearly where one beat begins and ends because you've grouped your quavers and semiquavers according to their beats, whereas here you've just mashed everything together. Okay, so it's unsatisfactory. Basically, it's permitted, but it's not as good as I think as this one. This one's the best. Okay, so I suppose a general rule of thumb to follow would be when you're using four quavers, which could be replaced by a minim, you beam them together. When you're using four semiquavers, which could be replaced by a crotchet, you beam them together. And when you're using two quavers, which could be replaced by a crotchet, you beam them together. And any other group of semiquavers and quavers that add up to a crotchet. Okay. If you have a bar that has a mixture, like we have here in front of us, of semiquavers and quavers, I wouldn't beam them all together like that. Okay, I would group according to their beats. Okay, that's the main rule. Group according to their beats. Okay, so that is correct, but in the next bar you could technically have something that looks like this. Your four quavers beamed together, and you could have, let me see, four semiquavers beamed together. Okay, so I know it may look contradictory because in the first bar you've got a beat together, and the second beat is together, and then the next bar you've got two beats together, and then this bar you've got a beat all on its own. Okay, so it is possible to have those four quavers being together. That's very possible. Okay, but as I said, when you have sort of a mixture of quavers and semiquavers together like that, I would split them up just to make it easier to read. Okay, so when they're all the same note, like we have in the second bar or here in the third bar, but then when they're all the same type of note, quavers or semiquavers, if they add up to a crotchet here or a minim here, you group them together. But if it's a mixture of both, I would just group them according to their crotchet beats. Okay. So you can see here that I've included a whole range of other simple time signatures. Okay, the first one that we've already looked at, the first group, were 2, 4, 3, 4, and 4, 4. And this group was asking us for crotchet beats, 2 crotchet beats in a bar, 3 crotchet beats in a bar, and 4 crotchet beats in a bar. If you are familiar with the American system of describing notes, you'll know that Americans don't say crotchets, they say quarter notes. Okay, so that helps us actually in terms of understanding time signatures, that crotchets are quarter notes in America. Okay, so you can see the relationship between quarter notes and the bottom note 4 in these three time signatures, 2, 4, 3, 4, and 4, 4. So quarter notes are crotchets, eighth notes then are quavers. So 2, 8, 3, 8, and 4, 8 all mean 2 quaver beats in a bar, 3 quaver beats in a bar, and 4 quaver beats in a bar. And the 2 under 2, 2, 3, 2, and 4, 2 refers to minim beats. Okay, so 2 minim beats in a bar, 3 minim beats in a bar, and 4 minim beats in a bar. Okay, so they follow the same sort of rules that we've already looked at for simple time signatures when you're grouping notes together, like quavers and semiquavers. There may be one or two extra things that I just need to go over briefly. So in 3/8, for example, when you write 6 semiquavers that fill a complete bar, you beam them all together. Okay, so it'll look something like this. Okay, so that's a special type of beaming for 3/8. Now I know it may contradict what we were saying earlier about, you know, try and always group according to your beats so you can see where one beat begins and ends and the next beat begins and ends. So that is not unusual to see then by grouping all the semiquavers together. In the same way in 2/4 you could have, you know, all your quavers beamed together. So in 3/8 not that dissimilar, because you're dealing with just the same type of note the whole way through the bar. In 2/2, 3/2, and 4/2, if you have 8 semiquavers which could be replaced by a minim, they're all beamed together. So I'll just do 2/2 just to let you see. Here's 2/2, and you have 8 semiquavers. 2, 4, 6, 8. Okay, that's equal to 1 beat, and then the next group of 8 is equal to your second beat. Okay, so notice that they still add up. You're still grouping according to your beats. Okay, so that still adds up to a minim, and that still adds up to a minim. 2 minims in a bar. Notice the difference if I still wanted 16 semiquavers, but in 4/4 this time. Oops, just let me see, 4/4. I would have to group them according to their beats. So there's the first group, 1, 2, 3, 4. There's the second group, 1, 2, 3, 4. There's the third group, 1, 2, 3, 4. So there's your 16 semiquavers in 4/4. So notice the difference between 4/4 and 2/2. In 1, we're grouping according to crotchet beats, so there's going to be 4 crotchet beats in a bar. And in 2/2, we're grouping according to minim beats, so there's going to be 2 minim beats in a bar. So there's one more thing I want to go over with simple time signatures, and that's basically what happens when we include rests as well as notes in simple time signatures. Well, the general rule is when bars contain both notes and rests, the rule is that a new rest should be used at the start of every silent beat. Okay, so just to give you a couple of examples of that, say we are in 4/4. Okay, there is 1, there is 2, there is 3, there is 4. That is correct. This is not. Again, because we've gone through the middle of the bar, so we should already know that from the semiquaver and quaver rule. That is wrong. Okay, because you've gone through the middle of the bar. Okay, so every beat, every silent beat should get something, basically. Let's try another one in 2/4. Let me see, in 2/4, say you wanted, there's your quaver and a quaver rest, and a crotchet rest. That's correct. And so with the reverse, that's correct. This would be wrong. Okay, that is wrong. That's good, that's good. The last one's wrong because you can see where the beats are. There's one beat, there's your second beat, there's one beat, there's your second beat. But here you've got half a beat, a full beat, and another half over here. So you can see that's why it's wrong. You always group according to your beats. Okay, so even though it's going to sound this will sound exactly the same as that. You must be able to group rests and notes together according to their beats. And again, let's do another example. I think I'll just do 3/4 just for variety now. Yeah, so same rules as before. Group according to your beats. Okay, and because we're in 3/4, our beats are crotchets as usual. So in 3/4, this is perfectly acceptable. Okay, this would not be having a minim rest. Okay, that's good. That isn't. Having two crotchet rests because you can see where the beats are. Okay, whereas here you've got two beats and then a crotchet note out on its own. Okay, so that's not good. So always group according to your beats. When you have a mixture of rests and notes in a bar, always group according to your beats. Again, I'll probably just do a few examples in different time signatures. Let's try 3/8. Okay, again, you can see the beats there. That's fine. There's your first quaver beat, there's your second quaver beat, there's your third quaver beat. That's correct, whereas this would be incorrect. Okay, grouping those two, making those two quaver rests into a crotchet rest, that's wrong. Okay, because you're dealing with quaver beats, you must be able to see where each beat is, whereas here you have two squeezed into one. Okay, so that's why that is wrong. Again, I'll just try another one with I'll probably do minim time signature now just for variety. Okay, so here's your let me see what one. I'll probably do 3/2. Okay, this would be correct because there's your first beat, there's your second beat, and again, just there's your third beat. You would never convert those two minim rests into a semi-brief rest like that, followed by that. That's wrong. Okay. So always group when you have a mixture of rests and notes together like that. Try and group according to beats, but don't put in too many rests. Okay, you don't want to start putting in rests everywhere. For example, say we were in 2/4, you don't want to do that. Okay, having two quaver rests when a simple crotchet rest would do the job. Okay, so that's wrong and that's right. Okay, so you don't want to use extra rests when you don't need them. Likewise, if you were in 2/2, let me rub this out. If you were in 2/2, this is correct. You know, it's obvious because you can see where one beat is and the next beat is. You would not do this. Have a minim note followed by two crotchet rests. Just doesn't make sense. Why have that when that is all you need? Okay, so there should be as few rests as possible, basically. Also, I suppose it's important to note that a 2-beat rest in the middle of the bar is treated differently from a 2-beat note in the middle of the bar. So again, I'll go back to 4/4 because that's the one that we were looking at earlier about the rule about not beaming notes through the middle of a bar. So let's have a look to see what happens when you have rest in the middle of the bar. This is how you would write a 2-beat rest in the middle of the bar. As you can see, it doesn't go through the middle. Okay, you would never do it like this. It's a wee bit messy, sorry. You would never do it like your minim rest in the middle. That's wrong. Okay, that's right because it doesn't go through the middle. But say you were going to put a note in here, it's perfectly acceptable to have a minim. Okay, so you can't have a minim rest, but you can have a minim note. That's perfectly acceptable. So the only time you're not allowed to go through the middle of the bar is when you have rests or when you're beaming quavers and semiquavers across there. But it's perfectly okay to have a big long note going through the middle. So that this whole bar is perfectly acceptable. Okay, but what you cannot do in 4/4 is have a rest there. You can't have that. That's wrong. And you also can't have quavers beamed like that. That's wrong as well. Okay, as I said before, you would need to group those notes together like that. Okay, so the middle of the bar is not touched. Okay, so the only time that you really use you have anything in the middle of a 4/4 bar is when you have a big long note. Okay. Also, just to make it even more difficult, what happens when we're dealing with rests that last, you're dealing with silences that last less than a beat. So when a silence lasts for less than a full beat, each subdivision of the beat must start with a new rest. So for example, let's say we are in, let's say we were in 3/4. You wanted a crotchet followed by a quaver. There's a quaver rest, followed by another quaver. That is correct, okay, because you can see where each group begins and ends. Whereas this, although it will sound exactly the same, it's written wrong. This would not be correct. Okay, that is wrong. Let's take it further and try it with semiquavers. Okay, so this is an important wee exercise, I suppose, is just to get used to what happens when you're using rests that last less than a beat. So say in 3/8 you have a quaver followed by a semiquaver, semiquaver rest, semiquaver rest, semiquaver. Okay, again, you would never do this. You'd never have quaver, semiquaver, quaver rest, semiquaver, because you must be able to see where each beat begins and ends. Okay, let's go to the extreme and let's see what happens if you have just one note, one very short note in a bar, like a semiquaver, and then the rest of the bar is meant to be silent. Okay, so say for example we're in 4/4 and you want to have a semiquaver at the very end of the bar. Okay, so a semiquaver here, for example, and all this space in here has got to be where your rests are. Okay, so remember you can't go through with rests and with quavers and semiquavers. You can't go through the middle of the bar. So the first thing you could do is put in a big minimum rest. That takes care of at least half the bar. Okay, then you would need to see where the third beat begins. That's your crotchet rest, and then you would need to equal this up to a half a beat, and then your other half a beat. So basically, there's 2 beats. There's your third beat, and then your fourth beat is in there. Okay. So it's not standard practice to put in a dotted quaver rest there. So yeah, sometimes you have, as you can see, we're using 4 rests just to get this one note. We're using a rest here, there, 4 different rests just to get this note. Okay. Same thing if the bar was going in you're doing the opposite. If you wanted the bar to begin with a semiquaver. So again, you would need a semiquaver rest to make up the first half of the beat. Okay, so that gets you the first half. Then you need a quaver rest, which gives you the second half of the first beat. That gives you the full first beat. Then you need a crotchet rest, which gets you to the halfway mark. And then you'd have your minim rest, which gives you the other half of the bar. Okay. So the best way of thinking about this is that semiquaver rest completes the first subdivision of the first beat. So that completes the first little subdivision. Okay. And the quaver rest provides the second subdivision. Okay, so that's your first beat there. Then your crotchet rest completes that first half of the bar, and then your minim provides the second half of the bar. Okay, because remember, you can't go through the middle of the bar. So it would be arranged the same way if you were doing it, say in 3/4 or in 4/2 or 3/2 or any other simple time signature. Say you wanted to do, let me see, do a more difficult one, 3/2. Okay, and you wanted just a semiquaver at the end of the first bar. What you would do is put in your first beat, okay, your second beat, and then this is what you would have to follow with to get to that one semiquaver note at the end of the first bar. Okay, so as you can see, same thing as before. This takes care of your first beat, that minim rest. This other minim rest takes care of your second beat. The crotchet takes care of half. Oops. The crotchet takes care of the first half, okay, of the third beat. That quaver rest takes care of the second subdivision of the second half of that beat, and then these two added together get you the other subdivision of the second half of that beat. So if you add this group together, that gets you half a beat, and you add that with it, that gets you the second half of the beat. Okay, so all together, that's equal to one beat. Okay, that's equal to your second beat. That's the other beat there. Okay, so you still have 3 minim beats in a bar. Okay, so you would never put in here. It's not standard practice to put in your dotted quaver rest, just as we saw before 4. Okay. Okay, so basically that's simple time signatures, and I just want to go over again what makes them simple. What is the simple part? What unites all of these time signatures together as being simple time signatures? Well, the main thing is a time signature that allows you to split a beat into 2 equal parts is known as a simple time signature. Okay, so if you can split a beat into 2 equal parts, then it's a simple time signature. So in 2/8, 3/8, and 4/8, the beats that we were using were quaver beats. Okay, and each of those quaver beats can be split into 2 equal parts, in other words, into 2 semiquavers. In 2/4, 3/4, and 4/4, we're dealing with crotchet beats. 2 crotchet beats to a bar, 3 crotchet beats to a bar, 4 crotchet beats to a bar, and each of those crotchet beats can be split into 2 equal parts, in other words, into 2 quavers. And in 2/2, 3/2, and 4/2, we're dealing with minim beats. 2 minim beats in a bar, 3 minim beats in a bar, and 4 minim beats in a bar. And each of those minim beats can be split into 2 equal parts, in other words, into 2 crotchets. Okay, so that's what makes them all simple time signatures. Very important to remember that. If you can split a beat into 2 equal parts, it's known as a simple time signature. And what we're going to look at now is, and the next part is compound time signatures, beats that are split into 3. Okay, or beats that you can split into 3 equal parts.